Leader, third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to rise here and speak in favour of Motion 16 on the order paper today. I'm very, very happy to be standing here to this advancement. This is a momentous, to my knowledge, occasion. This is the first time that I recall that an issue raised in a private member's bill has been brought forward to a committee, a select standing committee, in recent time here in the legislature. When Honourable Speaker, when I tabled my rideshare enabling bill for the first, second, and third times, I said I was doing so to help move the discussion forward. And I'm very glad we have been able to do so in such a productive manner. You know, Honourable Speakers, we in British Columbia want to view ourselves as innovators in the tech sector. But you'll never be viewed as an innovator if you're not willing to embrace the innovation that is before us in that industry. At long last, this issue will finally be addressed in a collaborative fashion by all three parties. And it's been 6 years, 6 full years, pushing 7 now, since ride-hailing companies first attempted to enter the BC market. Despite all-party agreement that we need to bring this disruptive technology to British Columbia in a regulated fashion, we've yet to see any progress until now, Honourable Speaker. Instead of my bill being called for second reading, ride-hailing will now go to an all-party committee, the Select Standing Committee on Crown Corporations, made up of MLAs from all three parties. For several weeks, the BC Greens have been working with the BC NDP to develop an approach that would allow important questions related to ride-hailing to be canvassed with stakeholders in British Columbia. The committee, comprising MLAs from all three parties, will engage with expert witnesses, debate issues related to the industry, and ultimately produce a report to be released by February 15, 2018. The committee framework is the opportunity for government representatives to talk to ride-hailing companies, consult with stakeholders about their concerns, and analyze how this sector will impact the variety of communities across British Columbia. You know, Honourable Speaker, sometimes people think that ride-hailing is only a metro issue. But let me tell you, when I've travelled British Columbia and I've talked to taxi drivers from north to south and east to west, I recognize that it's a desire to come province-wide. The Select Standing Committee on Finances that we were in Cranbrook recently as part of our travels, and the taxi driver who picked me up there told us about ride-sharing in her area. She said she wants it to come there because it costs her $100 a day to rent the cab from the licensee holder, and in some days, Honourable Speaker, she actually loses money. Whereas if she were able to be her own boss, travel when peak demand is there and not travel when there's not peak demand, it would allow her greater flexibility, and she was all for it in the Kootenays. You know, as we move forward, we must recognize that we already have ride-hailing companies operating this province, not only in Metro Vancouver, but here in the Capital Regional District. They're already here. They're already operating in Chinese language, mind you, but they are operating in an unregulated environment. And that, Honourable Speaker, poses a risk to public safety that this government has a responsibility to ensure that is dealt with. This isn't about just major ride-sharing companies. We've all heard Uber. In fact, we all hear the discussions that it's all about Uber. Uber is but one name that seems to be in the press a lot, but there's many others. We recently hear about the company Lyft moving to North America. But what's more, Honourable Speaker, is as I toured British Columbia speaking to tech leaders in all jurisdictions, from Kelowna to Kamloops to Vancouver to Victoria to Prince George to Fort St. John, is I recognize that there's also BC-based entrepreneurs, BC-based innovators, BC-based startups that are keen to move into this disruptive space too, but they can't because they want to play by the rules, and the rules have not been set, so they can't enter the market. It's our expectation that this report will be used alongside the work of Mr. Hara to inform all future legislation government brings forward to regulate both the taxi industry and the ride-sharing industry. Now, I appreciate the government has taken steps towards bringing ride-hailing to British Columbia by hiring an expert to begin to look at modernizing our out-of-date regulations for the taxi industry. However, my colleagues and I were concerned when we saw that explicit reference to ride-hailing was missing from the terms of reference of that review. We felt that this would be an opportunity to use our legislature in a new way and promote a multi-partisan, collaborative response to this issue for which there is pent-up demand like I've never seen before in British Columbia. While this committee will be tasked, the Select Standing Committee on Crown Corporations, with taking on the specific issue present by ride-hailing services, I hope that what we are doing here today provides a blueprint in this province for how we might deal with future issues as well. The world is changing and our economy is changing, and we have the responsibility as legislators to ensure that we are not simply keeping pace with the change, or in this case, struggling to even keep up with it years behind, but instead we're preparing for the challenges proactively and creating opportunities for this generation and next. Let me tell you, Honourable Speaker, here in BC, while we still debate the introduction of ride-hailing, the introduction of transport network providers, other jurisdictions are already talking about driverless cars. They're already talking about creating a regulatory environment that allows transportation without a driver. We are so far behind in British Columbia, yet we have so much opportunity to be leaders in this area, as well as others in the emerging economy. For 2 years, my staff and I have been meeting with representatives from the taxi and ride-sharing industries to discuss the opportunities, the barriers, and challenges facing BC's transportation systems. And let me say that while there are some license holders of taxis who are concerned that their investment may be affected, without doubt, the overwhelming number of taxi drivers and taxi companies that I've spoken to support the introduction of ride-hailing because they recognize that it's happened throughout North America, throughout the world, and their industry has not suffered. We know that the introduction of ride-hailing targets a generation, the millennial generation, who otherwise would not be taking taxis. They'd be driving their cars or not going where they want to go. It's the generation of people who are in evenings on Friday and Saturday nights are stuck in downtown Vancouver, trying to get home, or sometimes taking that risk that perhaps they'll drive home themselves because they can't get access to a taxi when they shouldn't be in that car. This is a safety issue for which a solution exists, for which a solution has existed for years. And I'm delighted that we'll start to explore this further in the Select Standing Committee on Crown Corporations. Quite excited by the makeup of that committee too, Honourable Speaker. It looks like it'll be I think I'm one of the older people on that committee. There's a relatively young demographic represented on that committee, the member from Vancouver West End, the member from North Vancouver, Lonsdale, and so it looks like we'll have a generational perspective as we move forward in the discussions on that committee. Over time, it's become increasingly clear that BC has fallen behind when it comes to evolving with innovation, unlike almost every other major city in North America. Other jurisdictions have had ride-sharing services in their communities for nearly a decade, and we just now are getting to work on it. And as I mentioned, others are already talking about autonomous vehicles. You know, Honourable Speaker, there's many an anecdote of executives, of tech innovators, coming to Vancouver on a jet from the Silicon Valley and getting off that plane and saying, I'm going to access the ride-hailing company here because I have an account, and then not being able to, and then wondering what's going on in this jurisdiction that's trying to build itself as an innovator in the modern economy. You know, some cities are getting driverless cars, as I said, before we can even allow ride-sharing apps to be operated here in British Columbia. It's just remarkable. So let's get on with this committee work. I'm excited to do so because we do a disservice to the people who elect us if we continue to pretend that the only things that are worth talking about are the divisions between us. On this issue, the BC Liberals campaigned to bring in ride-sharing enabling legislation by the end of this year, as did the NDP. As did the NDP and as did the BC Greens, actually for 3 years. And we finally have all three-party agreement. So let's get on and do this. You know, a willingness to debate and ultimately to provide a shared report that outlines a path forward is a good thing, Honourable Speaker. And I'm sure that every member of this House can agree when making big changes, it's essential that we bring the public along with us. We respond to public opinion, we listen to the public, and we move forward based on public opinion to bring in policy that actually reflects the concerns and values of the general public, but also provides a safe, equitable work environment for those embracing the new technology. You know, considering the level of politicization of this issue so far and the significance of introducing this new technology to British Columbia, I sincerely hope that this multi-party committee will provide great value in assuring the public's confidence. We're en route to developing legislation that will enable the fair, safe, and accessible introduction of ride-sharing in British Columbia so it can be passed as soon as possible. And it's my goal, Honourable Speaker, that the work of this committee will help make this the last holiday season in British Columbia without ride-sharing services. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.